One of my favorite passages on meaning and values was written by Robert Fulghum in his book, All I Ever Need to Know I Learned in Kindergarten. Just take a few moments and read through this and see what you think. Some people find meaning through creating and achieving. Some people can answer the question, why am I here, by developing goals and projects. We can fight feeling small in a huge universe by being creative and proactive, by making a dent in some way and being effective at what we do. Some examples are people who paint, do architecture, carpenters, writers, parents, or many other examples. Even children are very interested in objects that are affected by their movement, by making a clatter, by moving things around. Do you think we can find meaning through suffering? Viktor Frankl, a World War II concentration camp survivor, believed that when a person is confronted with an inescapable situation, he can find dignity, patience, or endurance. Through his attitude, he can decide upon the purpose for his suffering. A grieving widower found the meaning in his suffering by realizing that had he passed away first, he would have forced the grief of death upon his wife. He felt he spared his wife this pain and paid the price of suffering in her place. In his own misery, he found the meaning of sacrifice. What things can suffering teach us? Maybe self-control, gentleness, compassion. Suffering forces us to decide how we will react to it and often defines who we are. Do you think people will voluntarily suffer if they're certain it will have meaning? One example is Mahatma Gandhi, who was prompted by suffering to start a movement to end British rule in India. Did this nonviolent form of protesting make suffering a noble thing? Many people think that it did. Some other examples of people who voluntarily suffered for a cause was Rosa Parks, Martin Luther King Jr., Mother Teresa. I'm sure you can think of several other examples. Most people direct their search for identity outside of themselves. When we only pay attention to what others expect from us, we lose sight of what we expect from ourselves. Why do you think horoscopes are so popular? Some psychologists believe that it's because they provide meaning and purpose and guidance from the outside. They tell us what will happen in our daily lives, how others will treat us, how we will respond. It's who we are. Here's an example from a typical horoscope. Taurus. You crave stability and avoid making big decisions. You're very stubborn and will stick by your partner through thick and thin. Today, tell your boss you deserve that big raise. Be aware of going out on a limb for someone. It's not a wise choice. We are all conditioned to think the way they do, whether it's optimistic or pessimistic. We're conditioned by others and by ourselves. You probably saw the first Star Wars movie. Who was the real hero in that movie? I think it was R2-D2. R2-D2 was a little robot in Star Wars that had an internal program that made it run. We also have an R2-D2 inside of us, but it's called Are You Me Too? It's programmed for success or failure by whatever we tell it. Here's a poem that's based on this. I have a little robot that goes around with me. I tell it what I'm thinking. I tell it what I see. I tell my little robot all my hopes and fears. It listens and remembers all my joys and tears. At first my little robot followed my command, but after years of training, it's gotten out of hand. It doesn't care what's right or wrong or what is false or true. No matter what I try now, it tells me what to do. Psychologists and sociologists have been studying the effects of self-fulfilling prophecy for years. Back in 1955, Yale did a study that surveyed the graduating business class and asked them how many had written plans for their future. Remember, this is what that prestigious business school taught graduates to do in 1955, to set goals and think about what they wanted to accomplish in their lives. Only 3% had actually written down what they had planned for themselves for their future. 20 years later, they surveyed the net wealth of that 1955 class, and over 90% of the wealth was held by the 3% that had written out their plans and felt they could fulfill them. Now, money does not necessarily equate to happiness, but then neither does poverty. Nevertheless, do you think that the 3% who had a written vision were in fact driven and successful because of their written vision, or were they just lucky? If you want a self-fulfilling prophecy to happen, write it down and keep it in front of you.